I never fully trusted Sarah. Maybe it was paranoia after the accident. Losing Olivia changed me in ways I couldn't explain. But there was always something about Sarah that didn't sit right. It wasn't just the way she was overly meticulous, how she knew where everything belonged in our home, or even how easily she soothed Lily. It was the way she carried herself, like she had more claim to this house than we did. That night, after everyone had gone to bed, I sat alone at the kitchen table staring at the small screen of the security camera feed. The footage was on a loop, playing over and over. At first, it was just noise. Fuzzy images of Lily's nursery, the faint hum of white noise. But then there it was again. Sarah, standing by the crib, not with Lily, but talking to something I couldn't see. I rewound the footage for what felt like the 100th time. Sarah stood in the corner of the nursery, her back slightly hunched, her lips moving in a faint whisper. She wasn't speaking to Lily, that much was clear. She was talking to something just out of the camera's view. But when I turned up the volume and listened closely, I heard her say it. Sam. My chest tightened. I felt a chill crawl up my spine, the hairs on the back of my neck prickling. Sam. That name. It echoed in my mind long after I shut the laptop and sat in the silence of the dark kitchen. The next morning, I couldn't shake it. Sarah had always been so good with Lily. Too good, in fact. She brought toys, helped with her speech therapy, knew how to calm her down when nothing else worked. She seemed to understand Lily in a way I, her own father, couldn't. It gnawed at me. Especially after what I saw last night. What was she hiding? I tried to bring it up casually over breakfast. I asked her about her childhood, pretending to make small talk while my heart pounded in my chest. But she brushed me off, her eyes darting to Lily like she was desperate to avoid the topic. Sam, I said, testing her. For the briefest moment, something flickered in her eyes, a flash of recognition. It was quick, too quick for most to notice, but I caught it. She knew that name. The question was, why? That night I couldn't sleep. Something was gnawing at me, urging me to dig deeper. If Sarah wouldn't tell me the truth, I would find it myself. I started searching through old records, first about Sarah and then about the house itself. Her background was spotless, eerily so. It was almost like she had crafted the perfect resume, one that hid any blemishes too well. That's when I turned my attention to the house. I found an old newspaper clipping buried deep in an archive. A large family had lived here once, 6 children in total. But the youngest, a boy named Samuel, went missing. They never found him. The more I read, the colder I felt. I didn't believe in ghosts, or at least I didn't before, but something was wrong here, and I had a sickening feeling that Sarah was a part of it. I couldn't keep it in anymore. The next morning, I casually mentioned the footage, throwing it out like it was no big deal. Her reaction told me everything. At first, she played dumb, saying she only ever spoke to Lily as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. But when I said the name Sam, her eyes darted away. She was lying. That night, I watched more footage, my hands trembling as I pressed play. There she was again in the corner of the nursery, her back to the camera. But this time, she wasn't standing still. She rocked back and forth, cradling something invisible in her arms, whispering sweet words. Sammy. She cooed softly, like she was soothing a baby. My skin crawled. Sarah's behavior grew stranger by the day. She became possessive of Lily, clinging to her in ways that made my stomach churn. One evening, I came home early. I walked into the nursery and found Sarah clutching Lily tightly to her chest, tears streaming down her face. I can't lose him again, she whispered through sobs. Not again. My heart stopped. What do you mean? I demanded, stepping closer. Who are you talking about? Her eyes were wild, her voice shaking with desperation. You don't understand, she snapped. He's here. I need to protect her. I spent every free moment after that diving deeper into Sarah's past. What I uncovered horrified me. Sarah had a son. His name was Samuel. He died years ago in a tragic accident, or so the records said. But the details were vague, shrouded in half-truths. Sarah had been in and out of therapy ever since. No one talked about what really happened. It all made sense now. Sarah wasn't just our babysitter. She had come here for a reason, driven by a past she couldn't escape. She had lost her son, and now she was trying to take mine. I couldn't stop watching the footage even though each second filled me with dread. One night something happened that nearly stopped my heart. As Sarah rocked in the corner whispering to her invisible child, a shadow appeared beside her. It was small, childlike. It wasn't Lily. It was something else. Someone else. The shadow moved toward the camera, its face slowly forming into a sinister smile. I felt bile rise in my throat as its mouth formed the words, "You're next." I had to end this, but I was too late. Lily had already started talking to someone invisible. She called him Sam, just like Sarah did. That night, after putting Lily to bed, I heard a voice behind me, a child's voice whispering in my ear. "I'm not done playing." I froze. My heart pounded so loudly I could barely hear anything else. Slowly, I turned around, but there was no one there. Still, the chill in the room told me everything I needed to know. Someone, or something, was still here. I was losing my mind. Every night the house came alive with strange noises. Objects moved on their own. Doors creaked open, whispering on the wind. And Lily kept whispering to Sam. The tension was suffocating me, wrapping around my chest like a vice. I had to leave. We had to leave. But I didn't know how. The final straw came when I found Lily sitting in the living room, staring at the red light from the hidden camera. She didn't move, didn't blink. "Sam says you can't leave," she said softly. "He won't let you." This house, this cursed house, it wasn't just a place, it was alive. It had a history, and now I was part of it. Story 2. I've never been much of a believer in the supernatural. Ghosts, spirits, haunted houses, they were all just stories to scare kids, right? At least that's what I thought until the night everything changed. Now I'm not sure what to believe anymore, and it started innocently enough. Just a quiet evening, Daniel and I lounging in bed. Our 6-month-old Charlie was fast asleep in his crib upstairs. I glanced at the baby monitor, the blue glow casting shadows on the wall. But something was off. The usual soft hum of static had morphed into something different. Heavy, labored breathing. Slow and deliberate, like someone was in the room with him. I nudged Daniel. "Do you hear that?" He barely looked up from his phone, just grunted in response, more interested in scrolling through social media than the eerie sound that was sending chills down my spine. Typical. I sighed, brushing it off as a glitch in the monitor until I saw her face. Charlie's nanny, Grace, appeared on the screen, her face expressionless. But her eyes, God, her eyes, were staring right into the camera. Not just a casual glance, but like she knew I was watching. A cold sensation crept over me as if those eyes could see through the screen directly into our bedroom. Grace, the perfect nanny, or so I'd thought. She came highly recommended, with a resume that any parent would kill for. 7 years of experience, a degree in early childhood education, calm, patient. From the moment she walked into our home, she'd been everything I had hoped for. I remembered the day of her interview clearly. She had sat so politely, hands folded in her lap, speaking softly as she reassured us Charlie would be her top priority. Her soft brown hair was always neatly tied back, and she had this gentle, almost motherly demeanor. But something had shifted. The first odd thing I noticed was the toys. At first I thought it was a sweet gesture. Charlie's stuffed animals arranged in a neat circle around his crib. Grace must have done it to make the room look playful, I thought. But each night the toys moved. Different positions, but always facing his crib. Always watching. One evening I found something strange tucked under Charlie's blanket. A note, small, jagged, with shaky handwriting. It was an old nursery rhyme, the kind my grandmother used to sing. But it wasn't Grace's handwriting. I handed it to Daniel, hoping for some support, but he just shrugged, exhausted from work. "You're reading too much into it," he said. Probably nothing. But it wasn't nothing. I could feel it. Curiosity took over late one night. I sat in front of my laptop searching for anything I could find about our house. The mansion, with its creaky floors and drafty windows, had always given me an unsettling vibe, and it turned out I was right to feel that way. The house had a dark history. Over a century ago, it had been an orphanage. Children went missing, vanishing from their beds without a trace. And the caretaker? A woman named Grace Montgomery. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up as I found an old photograph of her in a newspaper clipping. The resemblance to our Grace was uncanny. Same soft features, same piercing eyes. It was as if I were looking at a younger version of her. I rushed to show Daniel, shoving the printouts in his face. "Look at this, it's her. I swear it's the same woman." He didn't even flinch. "It's just a coincidence, Emma. You're overreacting." His words cut, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was very, very wrong. So I took matters into my own hands. I installed a hidden camera in the living room. I had to know what Grace was doing when we weren't around. That night, after we left for dinner, I checked the footage. What I saw made my blood run cold. Grace stood over Charlie's crib, her lips moving as if she were chanting, but no sound came through the monitor. Her eyes, hollow and wide, stared down at him with an intensity I'd never seen before. She was in some kind of trance, and then the toys. They had moved again, now placed in a circle around the living room, dusty, old-fashioned, and nothing like the ones Charlie owned. When we came home that night, Grace greeted us with her usual calm smile, but I couldn't look at her the same way. The next day, I confronted her. "Grace, what are you doing with those toys, and why were you standing over Charlie like that?" She didn't even blink. Her smile widened, but it wasn't kind, it was cold. "I'm protecting him, Emma. They want him, but I won't let them take him." My heart pounded. "Who's they? What are you talking about?" But she said nothing more. Just turned away and continued humming that same old lullaby she sang every night to Charlie. The words echoed in my mind, haunting me long after she had gone. Things escalated after that. The whispers started. Soft, sinister voices coming from the shadows near Charlie's crib. I could barely make out the words, but I knew they weren't coming from Grace. "Take him, lost ones, the children." The sounds chilled me to my core. Desperate, I called the police, showing them the footage, but by the time they arrived, Grace was gone. Vanished, without a trace. No note, no explanation. Just gone. Then, the officers found the room. It was hidden behind an old shelf in the basement, a small locked room filled with decaying toys and children's clothes from another era. The walls were covered in scratched names, names of the children who had gone missing from the orphanage. My stomach turned. Grace had been here all this time, hiding something much darker than I could have ever imagined. But the worst part? It wasn't over, not by a long shot. That night, as I turned on the baby monitor, I heard it, the soft hum of that lullaby again. The one Grace used to sing. But she was gone, wasn't she? I glanced at Charlie. His eyes were open wide, unblinking, staring straight into the camera, and in that moment I knew. Grace wasn't gone, and Charlie wasn't the same. We were never truly alone. Story 3. After the divorce, my life had turned upside down. Balancing a full-time job as an IT specialist and raising my 6-year-old daughter, Emma, felt impossible. I had to hire help. Enter Lucy. She was 19, a college student majoring in psychology, and came highly recommended by a reputable babysitting agency. From the moment she stepped through the door, Lucy was everything I hoped for. Warm, responsible, and instantly adored by Emma. It seemed like I'd struck gold, but peace of mind is a fragile thing. For extra reassurance, I installed a couple of hidden cameras around the house. It wasn't that I didn't trust Lucy. I just couldn't shake the worry of leaving Emma alone with a stranger, even one so highly recommended. The first few weeks went smoothly. Lucy always texted updates, Emma was always smiling, and I finally felt like I could breathe again. I could focus on work, and for the first time in months, life seemed to be falling back into place. But one night after coming home late, something on the footage caught my eye. Lucy stood in front of the front door for several minutes, just staring at it. She didn't move, didn't check her phone, just stared as if she were waiting for someone. I remember thinking it was strange but brushed it off. Maybe she was spacing out, lost in thought. After all, she was a college student. Who knows what kind of stress she was under? The next night I noticed something that made me feel a little more uneasy. Lucy was constantly checking her phone and leaving Emma alone in her room for long stretches of time. This wasn't like her. Still, I didn't want to jump to conclusions, so I started reviewing the footage more closely after each babysitting session. I wanted to be sure there wasn't anything truly wrong. That's when I noticed something really strange. One night I couldn't find Emma on the footage. Lucy was sitting on the couch, phone in hand, but I could hear faint laughter echoing through the house. Emma was up late, past her bedtime, but Lucy didn't seem concerned. When I asked Emma the next morning, she told me she had been playing a fun game with Lucy and a new friend. "What new friend?" I asked. Emma giggled. "He's Lucy's friend. He's really nice." I scrolled back through the footage. There was no one else in the house. Feeling increasingly paranoid, I installed more cameras, ones Lucy didn't know about. Now I was monitoring the house every night, unable to shake the feeling that something was off. I couldn't put my finger on it, but the sense of dread gnawed at me. It wasn't until one night, when I saw Lucy walking into the basement, that the real horror began. The basement was a part of the house I never used. I had explicitly told Lucy to keep Emma away from there, yet there she was, descending the creaky stairs. What was even more unnerving was that she stayed down there for hours, leaving Emma upstairs alone. I heard faint murmurs as though Lucy was having a conversation with someone, but there was no one else in the house. I rewound the footage, watched the front door and windows. No one had entered. From that point on, the basement became my obsession. Every time I left for work, I locked the door, and every time I returned, it was unlocked. When I asked Lucy about it, she gave me a smile that chilled me to the bone. "Oh, Emma likes to play downstairs," she said. "Emma's never been in the basement," I replied. Lucy shrugged as if I were overreacting. My gut told me something was terribly wrong, so I came home early the next night, hoping to catch Lucy in the act. But when I arrived, she was already gone. Emma was tucked in bed, fast asleep. Everything seemed normal. But the camera footage revealed a different story. Lucy had entered Emma's room, but she wasn't alone. A man was with her. They spoke in hushed tones, too quiet for the cameras to pick up. Lucy didn't seem like her usual self. She looked scared. But what truly terrified me was that this man hadn't entered the house through any door or window. There was no footage of him arriving. He had just appeared. The next morning, I confronted Emma. "Who was that man in your room?" I asked, my voice shaking. Emma smiled, her innocence making my skin crawl. "That's Lucy's friend. He lives in the basement." I couldn't let this go. The following night, I watched the live feed, determined to uncover the truth. At exactly 9 p.m., Lucy walked into the basement. This time, I decided to follow her. Quietly, I snuck in through the back door and made my way to the basement entrance. I could hear them. Lucy and the man. Their voices were clearer now, and they were talking about Emma. "It has to be tonight," Lucy said, her voice trembling. My heart raced. I couldn't wait any longer. I threw open the basement door and stormed down the stairs. But when I reached the bottom, the basement was empty. No one was there. Yet, as I checked the footage later, the camera showed something entirely different. Lucy and the man had been standing there right where I was moments before. The next day, I fired Lucy without explanation. I was too afraid to dig any deeper. But even after Lucy was gone, the basement continued to haunt us. I sealed it off, locked the door permanently, but that didn't stop Emma from asking about Lucy's friend. Even now, months later, Emma still hears him. Sometimes, late at night, she says she hears him whispering to her through the floorboards. I don't know what Lucy brought into our lives or what lurks beneath our house. But I know one thing. I'll never trust a babysitter again.